So we're going to go over the frequently made mistakes for assignment number 4. Some people did very well, good job. Other people did really badly. And so I will go through the frequently made mistakes and try to give you a chance to ask questions. This is, as I mentioned, if you don't think carefully about what you're doing, it can be a hard assignment. Obviously, some people didn't find it very hard, but let's go through some of the problems. So first of all, as usual, make sure that you comment your code and also that you format it properly. A lot of people were formatting their code in a way that made it very hard to read. So as always, don't do that. Here is one of the mistakes that a number of people made. So they initialized the completable future M0 to a call to supply a sync. That's way overkill. You don't need to do that. There's a much simpler method that you can call that will return a completed future with the value of whatever you want, which in this case would be 0. So think about that. Go back, take a look at some of the slides, see how you would do that, but that's way more inefficient than is necessary. A lot of people struggled with using join and get incorrectly. If I had to say the single most common mistake, it was misuse of join and or get. You should not use get at all. There's no need to use get. If you recall, the difference between get and join is that get requires the use of so-called checked exceptions, which is going to be problematic because you have to write try-catch blocks or put throw specifiers in your methods, declarations. So all those things are not desirable. So use join instead of get. And only use join in one place. That's also important. A number of other problems people had were not correctly making asynchronous calls. So you'll see that there's a bunch of methods with the word async as a suffix. So like get page async, get images on page async, and so on. And the intent are that those are async methods, as the name suggests. And a lot of people were not making them async. So that obviously is going to be incorrect. So in particular, don't call completed future here. That doesn't make any sense. That's not an async call. Likewise, here is get images on page async. You have to make sure this runs asynchronously. So calling methods that are not asynchronous will not make this an async method. So make sure you do the right thing there. Here's another mistake on get images on page async. So this person did then apply async and then called then apply async again, followed by .join, because they were trying to get back a completable future as opposed to a completable future to a completable future, which is what you get if you use then apply async. So don't use then apply async. Use that other method, that other completion stage method that flattens out the return value. Here's crawl hyperlinks on page async. Once again, this is supposed to be an async method. So this particular thing is not running asynchronously. And also, don't use .get. First of all, you shouldn't use .get at all. Secondly, do not use join here either. You have to figure out how to make this work using the appropriate calls that are async method calls, since that's the purpose of this. Same problem again here. And this is kind of crazy, so don't call then apply async followed by .join. That completely defeats the purpose of using then using an async method. Calling an async method followed by .join is really the same thing as just calling the synchronous version of that method, so do not do that. Instead, think more carefully about the completion stage method that flattens its return results. Let's see, crawl hyperlinks on page. So there's various problems here. A lot of different people got this confused. So don't be trying to call, then apply, blah, blah, blah. Instead, just call perform crawl async. It's much more straightforward. Once again, do not be calling join in the implementation of all the other methods. Join should be called in one place alone. It should be called at the very top in one place. And everything else should be using asynchronous calls or completion stage methods in order to get the right behavior. So you'll see a lot of mistakes henceforth throughout the rest of the frequently made mistakes that are examples of some violation of that principle. Do not be calling .join more than one time. This is way too complicated, so you don't have to use then combine. You can rearrange this stuff to be correct. And also try to avoid the use of these lambda expressions like a comma b, arrow a plus b, and replace those with method references, typically integer sum as a method reference. Here's a mistake. You don't want to count the number of elements in the stream. You want to count the values of the elements in the stream, because we're trying to get a return of the number of images that have been processed. And so this will not do that, unfortunately. So that's not correct. Again, this code is way too complicated. So you don't need to call an async method here, a factory method here, because this method will be called asynchronously by the caller of this method. So you don't have to worry about it making itself more async internally. And that'll clean up some of the code down here. Once again, do not be calling .join and any other methods except the top level one, and replace the lambda expression with a method reference because it's cleaner. There were a couple places where people sometimes would use map to int followed by .sum. I suggest that instead of doing that, you use reduce with the integer sum method reference. That's just a little bit more concise, fewer calls involved there. It's more the way someone would expect to see it if you read the code. This is an example where you don't have to have then applied twice. You can kind of merge the results internally to the implementation of the first then applies lambda expression or method reference. So actually, it'll be a lambda expression. So you can use flat map internally to that and so on. So I'd recommend doing that. Again, don't do the map to int sum thing. You can use flat map in some cases, which is cleaner. Here's another example of an implementation that's way, way, way too complicated because it's doing way too much asynchronous stuff. Doesn't need to be done asynchronously. Don't be calling .joins again. There's way too many calls to .join here. There should only be one in the whole program. Every time you call .join, it's defeating the purpose of asynchrony. So don't be calling .join, except that one time. Here's actually a case where you don't need to be calling an async method. So you don't need to call then combine async, because all you're doing is just adding things together. So it's just overkill to use an async call. Adding two methods together, two numbers together, doesn't require running in its own thread of control because it won't take any time to run. Common problem I saw in transform image async, a lot of people started by streaming the transforms. And that's not what you want to do, because if you stream the transforms, then you have to use .join, and it gets to be a mess. Instead, what you want to do is you want to wait until the image feature completes using one of those special completion stage methods we've talked a lot about. And then after the future has completed, then you're going to go ahead and stream through the transforms and apply them. So make sure you do that in the right order. Don't do the transforms first, followed by the other stuff, because you'll have to call .join. Instead, wait till the image feature is completed and then stream the transforms. And also make sure that you filter out any null objects. So if there's nulls, if for some reason one of the methods doesn't work properly, then, or one of the calls doesn't work properly, you want to be able to get rid of the nulls. And also, this is also overkill. You don't have to say then apply and return a stream. If you think carefully about what collect is returning, that should give you enough that you need to go by. And then the final problem here is don't collect and then do then apply and filter out the images and so on. Just go ahead and filter the images out and then do the collect. So that's the feedback on the frequently made mistakes from assignment number 4. Once again, some people did very well. Good job. I think 1 or 2 people got it almost perfect, or with one little tiny little mistake here or there. But a lot of people got it wildly wrong. So if you got it wildly wrong, then take a look at the comments I gave you on your code, which should be included in this summary in one way or another. Go back and watch this video, and then make sure you come to office hours. The assignment is due this Thursday at midnight.